Out is a half-hour series focusing on the LGBTTQ community in Brandon, Manitoba, funded by the Community Radio Fund of Canada. The series shares the difficulties LGBTQ members have faced, the achievements and strides they have taken, and the support received from the community. We hope the stories shared will help those uncomfortable with any LGBTQ lifestyles understand the opposite point of view and become more sensitive to the struggles they face, as well as provide support and information for any LGBTTQ members in the area.
Hi, my name is Jan Eck, your host of this episode of Out, and I am indeed very proud to help bring to you this series dedicated to the LGBTQ community in Westman. In the previous episode, we were continuing our interview with Jason Fiedler, coordinator for LGBTQ programming at the Sexual Education Resource Center here in Brandon, Manitoba. CERC presentations and workshops are the core of LGBTQ programming, and the information provided are a benefit to the lives of queer people. An educated public is essential to a just society, but they are also needed in order to help organizations, workplaces, and public institutions provide respectful, safe environments for employees or clientele. CERC is much more than public education. A private counselor based in Brandon is available and could be very helpful for families and individuals who might need personal, private advice and guidance, and Jason will be talking a bit towards that in this episode. Also, perhaps most visibly, CERC has been the biggest supporter of Brandon Pride, helping to host Pride events for almost 20 years. In 2017, Pride had bloomed to a week-long schedule of activity, and all of the events, many of which were located at CERC offices, were very well attended. And I took this opportunity to ask Jason for their reflections on Pride 2017, how CERC viewed the amazing turnouts, and what we might expect in the future.
Right, so maybe my family, the way I have a family is common, and I really value it. And I think my family's operates well in this structure, but can you also recognize people experience different things and that those experiences are valid? Those experiences can work and it can be different than you, and people can have different cultures and experiences than you. So valuing that difference while still holding on to those things you believe in and things that work for you in your own life. So separating those different feelings that people have. And again, that kind of goes back to normal. When you value certain things, you have certain beliefs, and that's your life, you think it's normal because you live it every single day. But it's common, yes, right? And it's normal for you. There's so many different lives being lived this moment, just everywhere around the world. So thinking that the way you live is the right way that's pretty strong thought for how diverse the entire world is, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're doing well, I can understand you going, hey, my life is good, I want to share this goodness with you. But,
yeah, exactly.
But it doesn't work for everybody. I think you hear this quite a bit when, well, I'm in a partnership for 10 years, and people go, how come you're not married? Well, it's just not really what I want to do. It's part of my belief systems and values. And it's a little cognitive dissonance there. I don't think that they really understand that other people could have different goals in life, or just where they see themselves going with their life.
Yeah, and sexuality is a big topic. So there's so many different ways you can experience it that it's hard to even comprehend. So yeah, like, even though people may share a sexuality, like, how do you feel about marriage, having kids? How do you feel about monogamy? There's many pieces of it. And again, sexuality, when it comes to the sex piece of it, can be a very personal and private experience, which is fine. But that makes it hard to understand, like, other people. When you have this private experience that maybe you don't talk about with other people, and there's many reasons for that. But then, how are you going to understand someone that doesn't want to get married but has kids and isn't monogamous when, you're married, you're monogamous, and you have kids, and that's like the way to be? Some of that stuff's very private. So how do you understand, you don't want to, it's some people don't want to understand the other ones because then they have to like think about the private part of it maybe, when really you don't have to think, how do you have sex? What does that look like? That's such a small part of sexuality. Like, how did your family operate? How does this work for you? Oh, okay. Like, my family, like, my kid's raised by 3 parents. I have co-parents, and this is how it works, right? Oh, well, in my family, we just have 2. We both live together. Okay, well, that's different. You can talk about that. That's part of sexuality. That's not super private. You don't have to talk about, do all 3 co-parents have sex? That's kind of a private matter, right? Same thing, a married couple, that's part of sexuality. You can view that family, you can learn about that family without saying, well, how did the 2 of you have sex? I need to know. Again, there's that assumption with the more common or dominant culture where like straight people are sexual beings, but no one's like, heterosexual sex, how does that work?
Very diverse.
Yeah, because it can work many different ways. It doesn't work, heterosexual sex, I don't think it's even a thing. Like gay sex isn't a thing. There's sex. There's many different kinds of sex people can have, and those people engaging in those activities have different sexual identities that they have, but it doesn't make that action have an identity itself, yeah.
I'm glad we went there too. It's which one of you is the wife? Which one of you is the husband?
Yeah, who's the man in the relationship? It's just, what does that mean? Like, I think when people say things like that, they're really saying like, who penetrates who, I think is what they're asking. And that's such a weird question, because, I often say, if you're asking someone that question, you have like no imagination, right? Because sex doesn't have to involve penetration at all, for one thing. But other than that, like, maybe people take turns. Like, yeah. What does that say about your sex life? Who's the man in your relationship? And like, what does that say about what you think a man is? I guess we could turn that into a whole workshop. So there you go. For folks listening on the street, if anyone ever asks you who's the man or whatever, who wears the pants in your relationship, just turn it into a workshop right there and just ask that person questions, and I'm sure they will never ask you ever again.
That's great.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the LGBTQ plus counseling available through SERC? Who can access this service, and what issues does this service help with?
Yeah, so the counseling services we have here at SERC Brandon is in partnership with Rainbow Resource Center. So Rainbow Resource Center is based in Winnipeg, but our counselor is based here in Brandon. And she meets with folks, anyone that identifies LGBTTQ, folks that are questioning their identity, folks that are sure of their identity, really to talk about most anything, but because identity, like sexuality, can impact many parts of your life. So it isn't people that need to come in and only talk about their identity, but they can talk about their relationships with others, how it's impacting work, their own feelings, whatever. It's a free service. And also our counselor will work with individuals, but also with groups. So that could be, I came out to my family and they don't know how to deal with it, and I really want to have a conversation with all of them, or it could be friends, or a partner or supportive person or support person can also do a session with folks. And yeah, if people are interested in accessing the service, they should contact SERC Brandon and we can get them hooked up.
SERC has a very close relationship with Brandon Pride. How does SERC work with Brandon Pride to deliver events and coordinate activities? Because we will be talking about Brandon Pride 2017 extensively in other episodes, I don't want to take too much time here, but it would be very insufficient not to ask you. So how good does it feel for SERC to see this event grow and take off with such amazing community support? And what were some of the highlights personally for yourself or for SERC at Brandon Pride 2017?
Yeah, I could say a lot of things. I'm newer to the position here and to Brandon. I've been around for about a year and a little less than a year in this position at SERC. So I only know what I've heard as far as like the history, but some folks here at SERC Brandon have been involved with Pride going years back. They've told me, they've had like barbecues that have been like 20 people showing up. So that was Brandon Pride. It was like 20 folks at a barbecue hanging out, which is great. So seeing it grow to be like 1,000 people marching in the streets has to be really great. For me, being new to Brandon, I'm from Detroit, Michigan, which is a bigger city. But even with my experience of being at Prides in bigger cities, seeing like 1,000 people march through the streets in Brandon is still really great. So it made me very happy just to like be out in the street and like people honking their horns and waving. People generally, I think, were like, oh, this is great. There's like a march happening. And everyone in the march, I feel, was having like a really good time and was feeling really empowered by that. So for SERC kind of to help like organize like 20 people barbecues, and now Brandon Pride has really grown to be its own organization. So SERC works with Pride, but Pride's really its own thing now, which is that's like a symbol of growth itself, that there can be this community organization that's working on its own. But SERC, we continue to provide meeting space for SERC Brandon. We've also hosted 2 events during Pride Week, and on Tuesday at noon, I thought, we're doing a lunch and learn. It's Tuesday, it's noon. This is not going to be a very big event, but that's okay. And we had standing room only. We had 35 folks show up to hear Ray Hutton present about transgender inclusion in high school sports in Manitoba and the research he's doing around that. So that was really great for me. I was just like, whoa, there's like all these people here. And it was great because a lot of people showed up, and also folks came to learn. I think Pride has many purposes, and people want to come to Pride in the Park, and there's like entertainment and it's fun, and you get like a hot dog for free, and that's great. But knowing that people were like, no, I want to learn. I want to continue like moving stuff forward. I want to like help with this project. People are asking, right, like, what's like the next step going forward on your research? Like, how can other people help with this? And so that sort of engagement was really great to see. The second event that SERC hosted during the week was the last event of the week. On Sunday, we had Michelle McHale and Karen Phillips, who people might know them from Steinbach Pride. They helped start the first Steinbach Pride and went through many experiences in Steinbach and filing human rights complaints with schools, with their children, and what they were experiencing in the schools. And they just came and talked about kind of like behind the scenes, like Steinbach Pride happened, but here's the events that led up to it. Here's what's happened since then. And it was just really powerful just to hear everything they've gone through and how they're like, yep, we're still doing it. We're still moving forward. And this is all the other stuff we're going to keep doing. And just the like drive they have and all the work they're doing was really amazing and inspirational, and I felt was a great way to wrap up the week. So for me personally, like Pride Week was really great. For SERC, it was great that we were able to host 2 events, but also take part in the march. We had a table at the park, and also my coworker, she was able to speak on the main stage at Pride of the Park, kind of talking about that history I mentioned of, hey, everybody, there's 1,000 people marching in the streets. 10 years ago, it was 30 of us.
That was Carrie.
Yes, that was Carrie Judd, yeah.
Okay, so you've mentioned a couple of your highlights, but your involvement with Pride and Pride in the future, can we expect anything different, anything new in the future?
Well, for SERC, I think it's going to kind of continue the way it is, because, again, kind of one of the highlights I pointed out is that Pride, for the last few years, has been its own organization. And so SERC is really excited to promote and like support Pride as its own organization, and hopefully it can grow. So really SERC will continue to allow, well, not allow, I shouldn't say allow, we'll continue to host Pride, having meetings here. I'm sure you're going to see SERC being involved probably with another lunch and learn next year. So our participation is probably going to look the same, and it's really up to Brandon Pride as an independent organization to continue working with us and what they want to see and how they want it to grow.
Pride events are also a massive opportunity for awareness and education, but SERC raises LGBTQ+ issues and awareness through events in Westman throughout the year. Some of these are in conjunction with notable calendar dates, such as the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia. So there was a film presentation this year at ACC, for example. Could you care to speak about that or any other events that happened throughout the year?
So this year, International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Transphobia, that movie screening was actually mainly done by ACC and BU. So CERC, we played a small part helping organize that. We tabled at the event, but ACC took the lead on providing the space for it. ACC and BU found the film to show, and then staff from ACC and BU facilitated discussion after the film.
Excellent.
I actually wasn't there because CERC, we did have our own event happening that evening at the same time.
Okay.
So what we did here is had an event aimed at parents and guardians supporting youth coming out. So our event went well. I don't remember the exact number, but I think we had 12 to 15 family members show up, and we had some dinner. We chatted, I went over some of those terms I talked about before, terminology, human sexuality development, some of those presentation points I usually do. And then actually we had 2 students from some local GSAs that came and shared their stories about coming out, what went well, what didn't go well, and kind of tips from their perspective, which was really great. They spoke really well. They were super brave just speaking to strangers about coming out. And people on evaluation said they really valued hearing from younger folks as well, since that's who we were talking about. So that was a really fun event that we did. But International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Transphobia, we'll be doing something again next year. Pride, we played a part. We had a few events. That's something CERC does every year. We had also in the fall, we did Transgender Day of Remembrance that CERC participates in. And last year, there was a service at Knox United Church that happened with the reading of the names, and a few different community groups helped with that, reading the names, and there was a small lunch after. And then in the evening, the BU Collective put on a candlelight vigil at Brandon University. So there was 2 events. Some people aren't comfortable in a church environment. Some people aren't available during the day. Some people aren't available during the evening. So Brandon has those 2 events. So that's something that will happen again next year. And then another date to point out, CERC actually did not have a part in it, but the BU Collective this spring, they did a film screening for Transgender Day of Empowerment, which is a really important day because Transgender Day of Remembrance is very important. But talking about transgender people, it's important to talk about how we're alive and we're not only victims of violence. So that Transgender Day of Empowerment works as a good balance to Transgender Day of Remembrance. And so moving forward, CERC, hopefully we can work with maybe the BU Collective or other folks to offer something around Trans Day of Empowerment as well. So those are just some of the important days throughout the year that CERC has played a part in or would like to play a part in. Mentioning the clothing exchange, we're doing that next week, July 14th. I'm like, what day is it? And that's part of our ongoing group. We have called the LGBTTQ Get Together, and that's the second Friday of every month. And that's just for folks of any age that identifies anywhere in the alphabet soup, just to come hang out. There is some peer support where people, if they want to chat, about what's going on, there's room for it. But I find some people, they just want to come and be themselves, meet other people like them. And so that's mainly what that group is focused on. And so this month, kind of just as a special event, we are doing a clothing exchange. So that's a great way for people to clean out their closets, clothes they're not wearing anymore, get some stuff for free. And speaking for myself, not everyone, but for myself, I'm a genderqueer, transgender person, and so exploring my own gender, I have found clothing exchange parties with friends way easier to grab that piece of clothing I'm not super comfortable doing at a clothing store and try it out or and take it home. It's a lot less stressful of an environment to do that in. And also it's low risk. I want to try out this and see if this feels good on my body. It costs me nothing. People are giving away this. Instead of going to a store, I spent $40 on this dress or this shirt or this tie or whatever, and then being like, no, actually this isn't the right fit, you know? So and outside of gender issues, it's just a nice community thing to do, and who doesn't like free stuff? So.
Okay, we don't. I just want to talk a little bit about external resources, and we've talked about Brandon Pride, which is an awesome resource that everyone should get to know and volunteer and to be a part of. But what other external resources are available for LGBTQ plus people here in Westman?
All right. Luckily, I have this sheet that folks want to come into CERC, they can pick up. I can make copies of it. So you already mentioned Brandon Pride, but also we've talked a little bit about the BU Collective at Brandon University. So that's for students, but they also do events that anyone can show up to. I mentioned the Trans Day of Empowerment event, the movie screening. I went to that. I'm not a Brandon University student or staff. So a lot of their events people can participate in. There's, through the Rainbow Resource Center, there's Camp Aurora for younger folks. It's a summer camp for LGBTTQ young people. It's, from my understanding, it's usually free to go to. Every summer you just have to apply. So that is not in the Westman region. However, Rainbow Resource Center helps people get transportation to that. So if young folks are interested, they can check that out. If you're a little bit north of Brandon, there is a group that meets in Dauphin at the Dauphin Friendship Center, and they meet twice a month, so every other week. And so that's like a peer support group. The GSAs in the schools, mostly for like high school age students. So a GSA is a Gender and Sexuality Alliance, or sometimes called a Gay Straight Alliance. And so those run through the school year. Neelan, Crocus, and Vincent Massey all have active GSAs. And there are GSAs, I know, in some of the surrounding areas, some of the smaller schools in the rural areas. Clinic Community Health, they have a number of crisis lines, a few different ones. If you go on their website, if you look up Clinic with a K, K-L-I-N-I-C, if you look them up, you'll find their list of different resources and call-ins. And so folks can call. You don't have to be in a crisis. You don't have to be suicidal to call. You can call and ask for different resources. Knox United Church, for folks that are religious, they're an affirming church. I already mentioned, they host Transgender Day of Remembrance. They're part of Pride every year. They also, I believe, some folks that are involved in PFLAG are active there. So actually, I'll skip to PFLAG. PFLAG is a group for parents and friends that may know someone that's like lesbian, gay, or bisexual, just needing support. So if you're a parent or guardian or family member of someone that's lesbian, gay, or bisexual has come out to you and you're like, I don't know what to do with this information, you can meet with PFLAG and they can tell you they've gone through it and provide support. Here at Brandon, we mentioned here at Brandon, CERC Brandon, we mentioned the counseling program. We mentioned the get-together groups here at CERC. We do also have a trans group that meets once a week. We don't advertise the day that meets for privacy concerns, but if folks are interested in joining that group, they can contact us here at CERC to get more information about it. I mentioned PFLAG. There is also a parents and family of trans individuals group that meets. So again, if you're a family member of a trans individual that's come out, you're not sure how to deal with that situation, there's a group that meets and talks about those issues. Smitten, and they're a business, but they're a good resource. They have pamphlets available. If you want a pride flag, that's the place to get it in Brandon, as far as I know. And then for gender diverse, transgender folks, they do have a bunch of transition-related clothing and items there. And even if you don't buy anything, they're happy to tell you information about those items. Also in Brandon, we do have a trans health clinic for transgender folks. So if people are seeking transition-related health care, there is a clinic right here in Brandon you can go to. It's housed in the public health office, and that's once a month. So if people are interested in that, again, they can contact CERC. I can hook them up with the contact information. And then if you're online, there are a few groups. Most notably, if you use Facebook, there's a Westman LGBT group on Facebook that people join, and then you can just hear about events. So for the clothing exchange, I'll probably post that flyer up at that group so people can come. Trans Day of Empowerment flyers might go up. Someone, if they're having a movie screening or a party or a social, whatever, you'll hear about stuff there, and people have discussions, and that's a good way to find out what's going on and get connected if you are online.
So to find CERC, CERC has moved into spacious new digs that are really comfortable and modern, and it's easily accessible at Pacific and 18th. So what else might be new and upcoming at CERC?
CERC, not just in Brandon, but wide, has launched a new initiative called the Learning Institute that's aimed at service providers. So if you go to our website, you'll see there's institutes in Winnipeg and Brandon aimed at a bunch of different topics. One is LGBT. There's one on working with youth. There's many other topics that people can take. People can sign up to these, and it's a full day, kind of like you show up at a hotel, banquet room, there's like lunch served, you get a full day training for service providers on different topics. So that's just a new way for us to offer our education and get it out to people. So people can check that out on our website if they're interested. Also, agency-wide, we did have a program called White Wolf Speaking, which was an Indigenous-focused program. And recently, we transferred that program. So there's an organization, it's Kani Kanichik in Winnipeg, that now houses the White Wolf Speaking program. And the reason CERC did that is because that's an Indigenous-focused and Indigenous-run organization. So while CERC, we have members that are Indigenous, it was important that this Indigenous-focused program was housed at an Indigenous agency, which we're not an Indigenous agency with a specific Indigenous focus. So that transfer over and that new partnership that we have with them is a new thing for us that organization-wide we're pretty excited about. But other than that, here at CERC Brandon, we're always updating our knowledge. So this summer, we're doing lots of reading to update our knowledge, and then, as people call us out to do presentations, we'll be out doing presentations. We'll be tabling at events. You'll see us around. You'll see our bins of condoms provided by CERC. I'm sure if you go to any of the fun events this summer, look for those. Grab a few if you need them. But yeah, people can contact us if they are looking for resources or wants to do a presentation.
Well, that leads me to, how can one contact CERC?
Yeah, so if you want to email us, there is an email. It's brandon@circ.mb.ca. So CERC is SERC. And that will come to the Brandon office. There is a general email if you want to contact just CERC as a wider organization, but if you want to contact us here at our Brandon office, it's brandon@circ.mb.ca. Our phone number here at CERC Brandon is 204-727-0417. You already mentioned we're at 18th and Pacific. The address is 1700 Pacific. We're by Tokyo Zone and Get Nailed over here in the Strip Mall, so we'll have a big CERC sign up. And then people can always go to our website, which is circ.mb.ca, and find a lot of information, and our contacts are all on there.
Well, excellent. I want to thank you and CERC for all the excellent services that you provide for the West Mountain region. Thank you very much for this interview, Jason.
Thank you, not a problem.
Is there anything I missed before I wrap this up?
Yeah, there's one story I wanted to tell from Pride, because you talked about highlights. I am also on the Pride committee, so that is separate from my job at CERC. But our chair, Mariah, asked me and then another member, Rena, can you carry the banner and be at the front of the parade? I was like, sure, why not? I love attention. But we ended up being right behind Amelia and Margaret, our Grand Marshals. And so we were walking, and I'm just like, this is fun. We're on the streets. People are honking, having a good time. And Amelia and Margaret were just like marching. They had flags there waving. I'm just like, how can this moment get any better? And then Amelia, just like, since we were right behind them, she just reached over and grabs Margaret's hand. So they're like holding hands, and with their other hands, they're waving flags. And I'm like, okay, it is getting better. This is very nice. This is like a cute, beautiful, wonderful, empowering moment. And then there's one point where the march kind of stopped. I think we were at like a traffic light waiting for traffic to clear or something. And Amelia turned around and she just said, not to quote exactly, but it was something along the lines of, "We've been together for more than 40 years. Never did I imagine we'd be holding hands in public in Brandon, let alone in the middle of the street in the front of a parade."
That was Jason Fiedler, LGBTTQ program facilitator at CERC, the Sexual Education Resource Center here in Brandon, Manitoba. I want to thank them for their great work helping the LGBTQ community thrive, not only through workshops and presentations, but for all of the events that bring us together to celebrate our lives. Also, many thanks to Jason for their interview and helping to bring this documentary series together. Thank you for listening. I am your host, Jan Eck, and you have been listening to Out on CJ 106 FM.